John, is it okay if I kind of just do a little bit of introduction and I'll kind of segue into your thoughts on things? Is that
Sure, that's fine. Go ahead.
okay? Yeah. So John and I connected several months ago. So I know. So I'll just go ahead and say, I run. We just rebranded into the Rising Workplace, but it's OMH Solutions is our previous company name, and we work with coming in and helping employers get a fuller understanding of their workplace experience, their employees in a comprehensive manner. We do detailed and customized engagement evaluations. My wife's side of the business is ergonomics and environmental design in the workplace. And that could either be conducive to employees looking at their tools from an ergonomic perspective, at their computer workstations, at their lifting, they're actually mechanics and doing the work itself. But we also look at the lighting and the surrounding environment itself. And one of the industrial organizational psychologists that John works with, Rebecca Mansfield, reached out to me a few months ago and introduced John and I. And John does these excellent evaluations, and I'll let him, he'll be able to represent it better than I will. But similar line of work as far as helping companies and workers themselves understand the workplace experience, their employees' strengths and weaknesses. And what we're really looking for with this forum is, we have a topic that we talk about, and people just have such varying, unique personal experiences with their work itself, and not only current jobs, but jobs that they've had in the past. And we see this as a way to kind of share those experiences in a somewhat structured setting, so that it helps guide participants maybe on their own paths, or maybe they just enjoy hearing stories, hearing ideas, sharing some of those experiences. I mean, work is so many things to so many different peoples and we all do it. This is just a forum to kind of discuss about that. And I'll let John kind of take it from here, and then we can just open it up a bit.
Okay, basically, my company focuses on organization leadership development, and what I have learned over these three or more decades is that a lot of the problems in organizations and people's experience of work is connected to the effectiveness or lack thereof in leadership. So what I try to do is identify those barriers to people's excellence in the workplace, because I believe people want to give their best each day. Most organizations don't know how to let them. Some managers or leaders, and I use that word advisedly, think they can make them. Well, you can't make anybody give their best. You can only make them show up on time. So what I try to do is diagnose circumstances within organizations, especially as it relates to the people, and identify those barriers to excellence, and then help people develop strategies for lowering, or in the best case, removing those barriers. So when David and I started talking, we have some similar interests in trying to ease the pain of the work experience. I believe, and I think I can show proof of this over these decades, that the real energy crisis in our society is human energy crisis. It's not about fossil fuels, because I have seen people chewed up and spit out by their work. And what I believe is that if you spend so much of your energy trying to make a living, you don't have much left with which to make a life. Mm. And the most recent experience of mine, I was facilitating a workshop of 6 gentlemen in the fleet maintenance business. And 4 of the 6 were in energy drain, and maybe over the hour we'll get a chance to talk about what that means to me. But anyway, one young man shared that he has 2 young kids, and when he gets home from work and his kids approach him, he has to shoo them away because he has nothing to give them. And I didn't say this to him, but how sad that is, that unique experience will, opportunity will not raise his head again. And over time, and most sadly for me, those kids will stop approaching him because they'll know he doesn't have anything for them. So I think the work experience is something that we can help people improve. And I think everybody has to be engaged in the conversation. So David and I were hoping that we could start a conversation, maybe create a community of people who are committed to sharing their experiences at work and helping each other. I think we can share with and learn from each other about how to manage ourselves better, even in the most challenging circumstances.
Oh, that was, yeah, that's great. I mean, you know, and I guess with Jeff, Matthew, and Susan, I mean, y'all want to just talk briefly kind of what y'all do and some of your own experiences with workplaces. I know Jeff and Susan's are pretty unique, so it's that's part of the reason I'm excited to see you guys here.
Susan, why don't you start?
Oh, okay. So I'm a career counselor. I went back and got a master's degree in career counseling. So my background is I do have an LPC, but I practice as a career counselor, and that's my training. And what does that mean? Well, I'm in private practice now. I worked in academia for many, many years. And for me, what that means is helping people on the continuum of their career transitions. So I mainly work with young adults and adults. Primarily, my work falls into a couple of categories. It always includes some kind of barrier or meaning issue or career management issue or dissatisfaction issue of some sort. For my professionals, they either don't want to do what they're doing, they're having trouble at work being able to enjoy their work or do what they were hired to do. They are not advancing. They have some level of needing to make some kind of a change. And my young adults, I do a fair amount of work with young adults who are not transitioning. So they're not merging, right? So they're graduating from college. They've put off the decision of what it is that they might want to do. They graduate, they really don't know. They either land poorly or they don't land at all. And they come to me usually anywhere from just before graduation to about 5 to 8 years out, that they're either unhappy or they are landing in their parents' basement or they're just dissatisfied. A good deal of my work also includes a fair amount of mental health work, because a lot of my clients come with various issues that make work not work for them. So it's not necessarily that they have mental health disorder, but they have issues that have been, they're either situational mental health issues based on what's happening at work, or they have issues that get exacerbated by work. So, and I've been in private practice now for about 6 years.
Okay. Then if you don't mind, I'll just share a little bit about what I do. And as everyone's speaking, I'm taking all kinds of notes, so I need to stay focused. In my 70 years of life, I've done lots of different things. Currently, and for the last 33 years, I've been self-employed. And for the last 27 years, I've spent focusing on employee assessment tools, and for the purpose of helping employers hire right the first time and putting people in a position where they're using their strengths, talents, and abilities instead of hiring them for a job. They hire them because of what they can do, and then they fire them because of what they can't do. So working with their talents and abilities. Also working with managers to helping them understand what their natural talents and abilities are, what their personality strengths are, and then using them so they're not promoted to their highest level of incompetence. The Peter Principle has had an impact on me years ago. I've seen people working in jobs that they hate, but they take it because they have a young family, and teenagers, teenagers grow out of their clothes and they eat lots of food, so they need more money. So try to help companies utilize strengths that people have in the positions that they best fit. And so everything, when someone was talking earlier, and I immediately thought about emotional intelligence, finding and think about your managers in life who really you enjoyed working for, and then think about the managers that you hated working for, and we can begin looking at reasons why those things happen. On the voluntary side, I too have worked with job seekers for about 35 years. I've written 2 books in regards to helping job seekers find what I call successful employment, not just a job, but successful employment. So I've done a lot of things in my time, and I think one of my lights just went out behind me. So bear with me, and I have lots of little comments to make.
Great. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. My name is Matthew. Well, you know that. My company is Jolly Good Media. We're a web design and video production company. We've made a few videos with John, which are some of our best. It's a husband and wife operation, and it has been for the 4 or 5 years we've been around. Recently, we decided to start hiring people to do some of the tasks that we had been doing. My job had been about 50% sales and 50% creative, and it's gone from 50% sales and 70% sales and 30% delegation and managing the people that we've taken on. The people we've taken on aren't local. They're either across America or across the world. So I do a lot of managing via chat boards like Slack or Trello or those kind of management tools. And trying to find the right balance of a good delegator is kind of something that I'm just starting to learn. I'm just starting to learn how to manage people. It's hard for me as a very personal person not to always just reach out to them and say, "Great job, have extra money for a beer," or something like that. I'm really happy with the work that the people we've hired have done so far. Turns out I wasn't that good at designing compared to these guys. I also run several networking groups. I'm the director of a networking organization called Team Referral Network. My own personal group is quite large. It's about 25 people. And I'm also the director of several smaller groups that aren't doing so well. And what I'm interested in trying to find out is why this one group we have going works so well, and why these other ones are not doing so well. My personal theory is it's about conversation, because the format for these networking groups, there's a very strict script to it that is supposed to help people who don't have as much leadership tendencies. But when I started introducing more conversational-based approaches to one group, we kind of start talking about the right way to network. They started really reacting to that, and that's when the group started building. But I don't want to shift too far away from the format because, I mean, not everyone's queued up to just host a conversation every day. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
No,
Go ahead.
No, you go, John, you go.
I was going to say, trying to figure out how to identify those barriers to excellence. And David mentioned it earlier that one of the tools I use, the tool I use is one I developed because I came out of a work situation that was so painful that I left it after 22 years within 3 years of being able to retire. So that's how I ended up on the streets, trying to figure out how to make a living. So I've been around for a while, and I understand at a personal level what pain at work feels like. I understand what we do to ourselves when we're suffering that pain. And in my case, it was a leadership problem that made it unmanageable for me. And what I realized through that experience was that I knew I hated going to work every day, but I didn't know why. So that was what encouraged me to develop the job person environment assessment, which is what I use now to identify barriers to people's excellence in the workplace. And so what I realized was that there is a way to reveal the source of one's pain at work. And so what I use the results of that assessment to do with people is facilitate conversation. And Matthew talked about the importance of conversation. And what I believe is that if we have a language that's non-judgmental and devoid of emotion, we can talk about anything. And I believe the stuff we can talk about, we can deal with. It's the stuff we can't talk about that gets us in trouble. So my job and my passion is facilitating conversation about the stuff that's difficult to talk about without a common, ordinary business language that's non-judgmental. So I'm also in the assessment business, and I use assessments as a diagnostic tool for engaging individuals and groups. And I think we can help people lower and, in the best case, as I said earlier, remove those barriers to their excellence because they want to be excellent. They just don't often know how. And sometimes organizational leadership won't let them.
Yeah, I agree with that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, the audio was. So, I mean, I think maybe a good place to go from here is to talk about some of these barriers that we've encountered, and if folks are willing, maybe even share some personal experiences from jobs that they've had or from clients that they've worked with. And you know, I've done in addition to the business that I run, I've done a lot of work in academic settings and medical settings, and you know, I think what this keeps coming back to, I hear two words that really kind of encapsulate some of the barriers that I've experienced. One word, and this is what John said earlier, is energy. And I'm not sure if that's that might be a symptom of the problem, but it absolutely, when there's barriers, it's an energy drain on both sides, and it just feels exhausting. I mean, you could have had a very light day at work physically, but if there's you know, a mental barrier or a communication barrier, which is what I'm leading into, it can just be so draining. And really, I feel like maybe I'm overstating it, but a good 75% of the barriers that I've experienced, it's usually communication breakdown. And I know that involves a whole lot, but just from my own personal experience, transitioning from, or even working in a medical or academic environment, people have similar trainings and backgrounds, and they're trained to use certain words when communicating about things that are wrong. And a good example of that is if you go to the hospital or you go see a doctor, ideally one doctor is going to use the same language as the next doctor to help you understand through the consistency of the words they use what is going on. And I've just noticed that in business, those words, it becomes much more generalized. And I noticed that in the more corporate and administrative levels, in some of the jobs that I've had, it's the words that one person might use are not always the same that another might use. And I just think about, you know, even requests for communication that certain supervisors have asked of their employees. They ask for their open feedback or honest feedback, but maybe the consequences of that feedback aren't fully disclosed. And I'll let folks share their own personal stories, but I just think it really, communication kind of just boils down to the heart and soul of any high functioning team.
I actually have a bit of a idea here, if I may share.
Absolutely.
Web design tends to be such a complicated thing to get your head around. And as a lot of the time, it's just me and my wife working on something that has so many different facets to it. Sometimes I'll be trying to point out something to her, or she'll be trying to give an idea to me, but that idea, the way that she's trying to communicate it, or I'm trying to communicate it, could be so complicated that we just miss each other entirely and end up talking for 5 minutes. At the end of that 5 minutes, think, oh no, we were on completely different pages. And during that 5 minutes, we were just getting more and more stressed because we really couldn't see where the other person was coming from. And it's kind of like you didn't know that. And at the end, you're like, oh, no, of course you knew that, but we were talking about completely different things. So there seems to be difficulty in the language that we use to communicate to each other, because one word could mean so many different things. And it's even more difficult when you're talking to or trying to express your intent to other people online as well with that. So that's a challenge for us.
I bet. Yeah. Remote supervising a team remotely must be a challenge in itself, and standardizing that supervision must be difficult too.
So I think I have to at some point sit down and really start to standardize things. It's like, have you ever tried to organize your folders on your desktop?
Sure.
And you think, I'm going to sit down today and I'm going to put a system behind everything. And it's going to be such a great system. So you sit down, you look through your folders and you try to see things like patterns so you can create different structures to it. But the patterns just seem to be everywhere and it's impossible to actually, wrestle them together. So yeah, it's trying to identify which words fit to which particular situation in this wonderful language of ours, English, is interesting. Because it is a big language. One thing can mean hundreds of different things.
Sure.
And that is a huge energy drain.
Can I step in here for just a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm having, the world of work and how we work and how we manage all the issues that come up at work is such a giant topic. And I'm struggling right now. I love the fact that we've got this conversation going, but I'm struggling to really get even a place to begin with this discussion, because there are so many aspects to this, right? I mean, that's why we're having this conversation, because it's not just we do this and that's it, right? It's not just communication. It's not just leadership. It's so many things. And, we could spend hours just talking about all the nuances of everybody's experience. And I'm just wondering if it might be helpful, I think it would be helpful for me, to pick an aspect of this whole, this massive, this Goliath that we're talking about, and talk about that and see where that goes, as opposed to trying to talk about this major undertaking, which, we can't surface in, but we could address one piece of this and see where that takes us. I'm having a hard time.
No, it's good. And I think you raised it's overwhelming. I think it's the barriers themselves can be pervasive and they change. And so if you were going to pick an aspect, what would be so for you, just focusing on personal experience, what's a large aspect to some of those to barriers, or when we're, and even some of the folks that you work with. And it sounds like even as a career counselor, like we also talk about internal barriers, like not even understanding what necessarily we want to really focus on excelling towards.
Well, I just came from a client, so so that's what's fresh in my mind at this
Sure.
moment. So maybe I'll share that. So so the gist of her story is that she started out in I don't want to go into the details, but she started out in a field where she was enjoying it in the communications area, and she was doing a lot of storytelling because she was using photos and video production, and she was able to work on, working in areas that were interesting to her. And over time, because she was really talented, right? It's that Peter principle that, that's been around for a really long time. Over time, she was a nonprofit. So over time, they said, oh, she can do this. And so she began to, her work began to get focused on what leadership thought was their priorities, right? And, as a good worker and somebody who wanted to be helpful and motivated by, accomplishment, but also on being able to help, she continued to take on these opportunities and ended up moving away from who she was in the process, right? And so she came to me after seeing a career counselor, doing all kinds of assessments. By the way, I use assessments too. I love them. I don't find them to be an answer. They're great tools, though. But she went with this career counselor, did wonderful work together, but unfortunately missed some very key aspects to the work she was doing, came up with a new direction, which was occupational therapy assistant, went into an occupational therapy assistant program only to discover some things that she probably could have found out pretty easily before she did that, but totally wrong for her, right? And so she's coming to me now because she still needs a new direction because she's very unhappy in her current circumstances. She works remotely. She's very good at what she does, but she's left who she is in the process, and it's creating all kinds of anxiety and discomfort for her because of the nature of the work, which is, I don't want to go into the details, but the nature of the work creates tremendous anxiety for her. And she's working in a nonprofit where she has no resources, and she's a one-person show. And so we're working on what she's going to do next, right? But the point of what I'm saying is that she got lost in the process. And that happens all the time to employees, right? And then they get golden handcuffs and they just cannot extricate themselves because now they have big responsibility. So.
Golden handcuffs. I'm going to write that one down. That's fantastic.
Oh, but it's not mine. It's just something that, over the years, all it means, you know what it means, right? That you make a lot of money and you don't want to make a change because making a change is going to mean that you have to change your lifestyle.
It's interesting, Susan. I work with youth as well, and I've over these decades modified my service for employees to be service for students, because what I've learned is that some people end up in places they would never have chosen if they knew who they were in terms of how they prefer to behave. Like a lot of people ask students, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the student will always come up with something popular like lawyer, doctor, whatever. I never ask a student that. I just ask them, what do you want to do when you grow up? Because I can identify through the assessment what they would enjoy doing, and then help them explore an array of careers that will allow them to do what they would enjoy doing and be successful. So now they're motivated to develop the skills necessary to do it well because it feels so good in the doing. So people end up in careers where they will never be comfortable because of circumstances sometimes beyond their control. I grew up in NASA as an engineer, and I saw during that time engineers get promoted to engineering management. Well, guess what? If somebody's enjoying designing stuff, building stuff, they don't want to manage stuff. And so overnight, you render them both incompetent and uncomfortable.
Right.
And so I think that if we focused on the individual and his or her passions and not on the career opportunities, we could help that person find a career that will fit. And you mentioned earlier about fit, and it's all about fit. And I had a session with a lady yesterday, and she had a couple of areas of poor fit in her role. And we had a conversation through the language of assessment that allowed her to understand her options for managing herself in those uncomfortable parts of her job. Because we'll never have an ideal circumstance, but rarely will we find an ideal circumstance. But if I know the source of my pain, I know how to manage myself, even in that painful part of my job, so that I can conserve something for myself. And I'll have more to do the things that I enjoy, so I can top off my tank in the parts of the job I enjoy and suck it up when I don't enjoy that part. Just like with me, I'm running a business. I don't like running a business, but I like so I have to suck it up, top off my tank by having a session like I had yesterday. And so today I can do some bookkeeping, which I hate.
Right. Right.
Susan, what are your initial thoughts on how to help this client of yours?
It's a good question.
Oh, well, we're already fairly along in our process. So essentially, you're asking me how I'm going to help her?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've had 2 sessions, and she brought to me, some information from, what she's done before, but basically, people have stories to tell, okay? And so part of the work is really listening for what the story is and bringing the story to the surface so that the client can hear them say it here and here and here and here, right? And so I don't have an answer for her, but I become a guide to be able to help her bring the information to the surface. So what did we discover? We discovered, in 2 sessions, we discovered that she, what did we discover? We discovered that she is wonderful at being able to listen deeply, to hone in on important ideas, whether they are written or they are verbal. And we discovered that independence and the ability to be able to not have to be responsible for others' work, right, are some of the things that we need to get away from. We need to get away from some of the stressors that are being created in her work. We need to get away from certain industries where she's developed certain kinds of specialized knowledge, some of which we will use, some of which we won't. But it takes the giant world of work to make this a shorter conversation, takes that giant world of work and it begins to sort it a little bit. So it isn't this giant world of work that has all kinds of other elements. We know that she doesn't really want to be doing hands-on physical work with someone, but she does love intimate work. So, and she loves being able to teach, and she loves being able to train, and she loves being able to help. And she's a wonderful writer and communicator. Well, all of a sudden, we took that big world of work and we eliminated a lot of areas. And now we get to look at some of the things that she knows that she wants to bring forward. We already know what we're leaving behind, what we're going to bring forward. And now we're looking at certain segments of work. So you know, teaching is an option, but her personality really doesn't lend itself to teaching. So we're talking about that, but we're probably not going to pursue that. I have some ideas, and what she's going to do is she's going to take what we've done and begin to start seeing the patterns, and I'm going to guide her into ideas that she hasn't thought about, and maybe some that she's thought about. She's a pretty sharp, pretty she's got lots of self-knowledge clients, so she picks up pretty fast. A lot of people aren't like that, but she's somebody that, you know, by session 4, she'll probably have a pretty good understanding of a couple of options that are possibilities, and then we get to look at the practicalities, which is how much of a change is she willing to make. We already know she wants to make a change. We already know that she doesn't want to use some of the things that she's been doing in the past, but we don't know whether or not she's willing to be able to, she likes school, but whether or not she's willing to do extensive school or less school. So we get into the details of that a little bit. I mean, that's just the way I'm going to work with her. I don't work with everybody that way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It kind of feels like there was an element of that whole kind of ball of elastic bands kind of approach where you haven't talked about it or really thought about it and kind of put some things off for a while. And then the ball of elastic bands just goes bigger and more stressful. But as soon as you talk to you and start like sorting through and laying things out, it becomes a lot simpler for them to see the system as a whole and to be able to change it.
Right. In other words, if you think about it, I can never say this word, but I'll try. So I kind of think of, if you take everything that we know about ourselves and everything that we bring to the table about our career experience up until now, we kind of lay it all on a table like a smorgasbord, okay? We then get to decide which of it we want to take to the dinner table and which we're going to leave on the table, right? But it all is available to us, and somebody else might come to me and with the same set of information, but they're not going to have such repulsion to some of the things that she wants to avoid. And so they may take other things off their table, and that'll make a couple of different directions that are not going to be right for this particular person, right? And it's kind of like what John is saying. It's, you know, who are we? And what are all those factors that make up who we are that's going to make something fit for work?
I think one of the things you said, Susan, that struck a chord with me, because I too believe it's important, is there are two things that I think it's important when you're trying to help somebody. We need to know their story, because in that story, we will find how their perspectives have been shaped by the journey they travel. And for me, I have to also know their preferences, because once I know a person's preferences, I know what things they're likely to be motivated to avoid behaviorally and what things they're likely to be motivated to seek. And then we can start having some serious conversation about what kind of career would likely be exciting to you and energizing for you, because you can do a lot of stuff that you'll never enjoy. You know, I realized in the first year of my engineering career that engineering would not be my life. I was good at it, and who wouldn't enjoy being on that wild ride trying to land a man on the moon? But I knew within the first couple of years that I need to prepare myself for something other than engineering, because I was good at math, and I still am, but that wasn't why I got up every morning to go to work. So I think if we can identify people's preferences and hear their story and listen to the story as a learner and not a judge, it's not about us, it's about those we're trying to serve, then I think we can provide real help. And so I think Susan, I think you're on the right track when it comes to listening to the story, because you want to know who it is you're talking to and what is likely to be satisfying to them going forward, so you can help them identify and explore options to their current circumstance and hopefully help them or prepare them to make wise choices for themselves, because you can't tell them what to do. You can only help them figure out for themselves what they need to do.
Right. And sometimes, John, they can stay where they are and make adjustments within the organization. And sometimes the personality of the organization really requires them to move away from the organization. And it may not be the work they're doing. It may be the leadership style or the personality of the organization that makes it impossible for them to stay. I mean, I recently worked with somebody and she came in and she was really quite a mess because she was really being harassed at work and she had been in this job for 30 years. And, you know, and it was not going to change, but, you know, people come in with the idea of rejecting everything when they're so stressed out and they're so miserable. And in reality, they may not need to reject everything. They're just in the setting is what may be the issue and not necessarily the work itself. But it's really easy to fall into it's the work. And if I change my work, then I'm going to change my satisfaction. This particular person, she just left the company and she got a better job with people who she, you know, actually had worked for in the past and really liked their management style and you know, and did a more due diligence when she accepted this next job. And you know, and she was able to retain the same work. She just is doing it in a place that's going to value her and treat her in the way that she needs to be treated to be able to be successful.
Susan, I'm just wondering, the other client you were talking about who you gave as the example, so this first job that she left, did she leave it because at first she was enjoying the work and then she felt like she was given too many tasks and responsibilities because the leadership was basically taking advantage of her ability to do a good job?
You're talking about the second example that I just gave?
It's the one
where she left the company and she went to a different company.
I guess it's the nonprofit, the one that became an occupational therapy assistant.
Oh, she never did finish the occupational therapy assistant program. She started it and left it.
Okay. And then before that, was she working for a nonprofit that was kind of overworking her or giving her too many responsibilities?
She's been working for nonprofits the whole time.
Okay.
Okay. And, you know, and she was of the belief that if she changed the nature of the nonprofit, where she wasn't dealing with the subject matter that she thought was really the cause of the amount of stress, that it would be less stressful. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It turns out that the nature of what they're asking her to do work-wise is the bigger issue.
Okay.
And that's what we're coming to, you know, in our work together.
So it's her ability to balance and work with the employer to balance the responsibilities that they're giving her.
No, it's that the work that she has to work on is such a tremendous stress for her. I mean, I'll be more concrete. So she's the one communications person. She works remotely. And one of her major roles is putting together this print material. Well, print material is high stress for her because once you print it and it's very expensive, right, to print. So once you print it, it's in print. You can't change it. Right. So there's a huge amount of stress put on this woman to be able to produce this product, and she's having to supervise the process of producing this product. Well, she doesn't want to be managing people, and she doesn't want the stress of having to produce print material that's going to cost the company a huge amount of money if she makes a mistake. Sure. And it's on her.
It sounds a lot of stress.
Yeah. So that's not all the reasons, but sure, that's a good deal of the problem. So she's working on some workarounds to see if the company, she's got several ideas of something that might help her in the immediate, but long term, it's not going to change because the nature of the work is just not a good fit for her. She's doing less of what she's really good at and really likes doing, and having to do a whole lot of the things that she's not loving.
That's interesting.
Real challenge for a lot of folks.
Oh, indeed. When I'm working with job seekers, I have them I have them create what I call an employment card. I use a lot of 3x5 cards, but actually they can fill up numerous ones. But writing down, what on a day-by-day basis, what talents and abilities do they want to be using? So many times people come and say, well, I want to, I'm in customer service rep. So they use a title instead of looking at what's really involved in the job. In my business, I can go into a company and say, what teams would you like to look at? And they'll say customer service department. But we start defining the behaviors, and that's 4 different definitions, based upon the company. But yet they're still using that same term. So a job seeker goes in and they say, well, I think I should be a customer service rep. Well, which of those 4 companies should they be working at based upon their talents, abilities, personalities, all of those factors?
That's interesting.
That issue of fit is really an important one, because we can be in the same job by title, but very different jobs.
That's right.
And so it's important to understand what is expected behaviorally and try to match that up with what the person wants to give behaviorally. And if you get a match, then you got magic, because the person will be motivated to develop the skills necessary to keep doing it.
That's right.
You get a poor fit, and there's nothing wrong with working at a job that's not a perfect fit for you, because none of us have those kinds of jobs. But if I know what part of the job is going to create my biggest energy drain, then I know how to manage myself during those times so that I am not running on empty or running on fumes by the time I'm done with that part of the job. But that issue of fit doesn't come up very often. And what you just said is a perfect example, because not every job called customer service looks the same.
That's right. And you're right. In one of my many jobs, I was a trainer for multiply and severely handicapped persons, looking at competitive employment. So I'd have to go in and analyze the job behaviorally, and then either train the person or find the person who had those talents and abilities who could do that. And we learned to carve out the job. So you're absolutely right. There's some things they could do. So let's work with their abilities instead of the disability. And in today's world, we should be doing that for everybody. Carve out those things that aren't a good fit. You mentioned earlier you have to do bookkeeping. Well, I have an accountant and a bookkeeper because I hate doing that. We should be able to, hopefully, with the companies that I work with, I help them to understand that's what you want to do. You want to find the talents and abilities. You want to understand the job behaviorally, and then do that match. Find that match.
But are employers really, I'm sorry, are employers motivated to look for employees on that level? I'm talking in generalities. Obviously, there are some that are, but my experience, both from having done recruiting before I became a career counselor, but also just working in organizations and being on interview committees, or just seeing how people are seeking employees, I don't think, for the most part, people are having those conversations when they're doing that kind of hiring. I mean, the hiring has become so much about a process of placement as opposed to trying to find the right person for the job. And once the person is in the job, I don't see a whole lot of wanting to develop employees to grow their strengths. I mean, now that's also a generalization, but I don't see leadership in general being motivated. I don't see those conversations happening.
Which is unfortunate. And that means I need to work harder.
And that might be a good topic. I mean, I like this topic of hiring from the perspective of the employer and the applicant, and looking at the due diligence on the employer's end. And you make a good point, Jeff. I mean, I think so many employers are just willing to kind of just fill the position and find, I mean, they look for a fit, but they look for a fit kind of from back here versus from looking for a fit close up and really getting a fuller picture of what they're putting into that box. And, you know, working with disabilities is a great example of that. I mean, making accommodations, whether they have to, or whether they're, you know, as part of the ADA, or whether they're doing it because they really want to make it work. I mean, yeah, everybody, whether you're making accommodations because of somebody's disability or because of their, just who they are and their personalities, like, I think it's naive to think that every employer doesn't make some accommodations for each and every employee that they have, or should be at least making those on some level. So I don't know.
I think Susan, you're probably right in most cases, because what typically happens in my experience is the employer has a job requisition and they look at a lot of resumes and they think that if the person has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform the function, that's a fit. Well, no. There are folks who have lots of talent that they prefer to use in ways very different from the organization's expectations in terms of their behaviors. And so I serve some clients who ask me to screen candidates for employment, looking at, and they worry about the technical part, that attributes versus functional requirements. I worry about the behavioral part. Is this going to be a good fit? Is this person going to crash and burn in this job no matter how good he is because of the way he has to go about using his talent? Or is this person likely to be willing to soar because it's such a good fit? And I think the organization and the employee benefits when there's a good match.
And customers.
Make it a win-win circumstance. And so if I had a client who it was a college, and they asked me to help them replace one of their VPs. And so I did the assessment and I sat in on the interview, and they did the technical part, which allowed me to customize the questions I was going to ask about the behavioral part. And I went through that process. After the interviewee left the room, we had a conversation. They decided to offer this guy, who was the best fit, both functionally and behaviorally, offered him the job. And a couple of weeks after he showed up, the president of the college called me and told me it was the absolutely perfect choice. But I think most organizations don't care.
Yeah.
And so most will just pick somebody who meets the minimum requirements, or at least they're satisfied with the person's attributes, and fit is not an issue that even comes up.
When I'm doing educational workshops for employers, I talk about attitudes, and the attitude of the employer is, we just need a warm body, and that gets them nothing.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
But you also have to watch the attitude of the candidates. I just need a job, or I just need a paycheck. You know, so we need to look at what, and you said the word earlier, John, expectations. What are the expectations on all sides?
Right.
And then we can begin to start talking at that same level.
Right.
I think sometimes I look at McDonald's. Why can McDonald's hire anybody that it wants? It's because they've got the system of what they need down to such like a 1, 2, 3 step process with a big set of instructions on the side, that they don't need to hire people to think. They just need to hire people to do what those instructions say at any time. So they never need to think about what the personalities are. Do you think that's ever kind of been spread across many industries, that people don't feel they need to hire thinkers because they've managed to boil the job down to such a 1, 2, 3 step process that they really just need to hire people that do that process, and they don't feel they need to hire people to think or get along with each other?
I think that might be part of it. It has become more of a mechanical process than it needs to be. But when you think about it, if you look at the health of most organizations in our society, we are sick because there are a whole lot of folks who are in the wrong place for the wrong reasons. And like Jeff just said, you know, he just wants a job because he needs to get paid. He has obligations. The employer wants to fill a slot so that they can get HR off their backs, or HR can get the boss off their backs. And so the motivation to fill a slot is very different across organizations, and most of them are what you just described, Matthew. I got a process I use. I'm going to put somebody in a slot, teach them that process, and everything will be right with the world. Well, no, it won't.
You know, using the McDonald's one, you know, from my experiences, I know that there are people that are like locomotives. You give them the tracks, boom, you know, and they will follow those tracks wherever you go. But I also know on the other side of the coin, there are people on the highway that would rather be in a four-wheel drive situation, you know. So you put that person who wants to be in a four-wheel drive, you know, creating their own trail, put them on the tracks, they're not going to last in the job. And vice versa, if you put a locomotive in a position where they have to be creative and find their own way to get to the end to solve this problem, if you don't give them the tracks, they're not going to succeed. So, you know, we have to look at people's, again, you know, I call it personalities, their hardwiring, their talents, their abilities, and then make up that match and look for that in the job. Because there are jobs out there like McDonald's, and there are jobs out there. Well, Matthew, and you're creating, you're taking an idea and you have to take it and then create it in such a way that you're meeting the expectations of your clients and building something. And so it isn't just step one, we have to do this, step two, you know, you've got, well, what do they need to do? How are they going to do that? How can we do that? And you need people who actually do that questioning in order to come up with the solutions and the products for your clients.
Trying to make it a system doesn't usually work to the fullest extent. As much as I try to like bottle it and put it into like a box and say, this is my system, like you're right, every different client needs sit down, think time. And I can't really have all this thinking myself. I need to be able to trust the people that work with me to be able to bring as much ideas. That's an issue that I have. Bit of a control freak.
I like what you said to begin with, and you said that, you know, the people that you thought you were a good designer until you started hiring the people that work for you. I mean, that's a sign that you've hired some good folks, and that you appreciate them. I mean, I think that's it's not obviously an easy thing, but it's maybe some validation that you're doing a good job at it. So.
Yeah.
Hiring is a long, horrible process with many rotten apples. But I think I landed on my feet in the end.
I like that definition, a long, horrible process with many rotten apples. Let's put that in the dictionary, hiring. So let's wrap it up. I appreciate everybody coming. Do you want to, and Susan, I do like what you said earlier about maybe trying to focus it down on a more maybe tangible issue. We kind of ended on hiring. We can segue into that the next for the next month. I think our goal is to have one of these once a month. Maybe we'll do it in 4 weeks, the first Thursday of September. I'll send out an invite and touch base with John. Any other topics or thoughts that folks would like to see addressed or discussed here?
I think it'd be good next time if we had kind of like Susan said, a very kind of specific idea of what we were going to discuss, or maybe like a question that we could all tackle.
You mean like almost like a scenario or like a problem?
But yeah,
Okay.
something where we can really get into the weeds.
Okay. So something like analysis, like something that we can analyze, similar to the client example that Susan gave, but maybe something more, I don't know, something just kind of ready, concrete. Okay.
And maybe where is the level between a person's grit and a person's placement? Like how much should a person really be kind of like sucking it up because there's always going to be bad things where they work, and how much of the question is the workplace in general and how much that's affecting people? I'd like to know where that balance is, where that line is.
I like it. Okay. The level between grit and placement. That's good.
Maybe.
Okay.
That could be a book title.
Yeah, right?
I really would love to talk a little bit about the organizational side, because you know, in the ideal world, people will do the work, they'll find out who they are and where they fit in the world of work, and they'll make good choices and go after jobs that are good choices for them. Most of the time, that's not going to happen, right? So now the question then is, what's happening organizationally to me, and how do we help organizations be more I don't know, more educated, less naive,
Less like margarine and more like butter.
So you mean like synthetic? Is that what you're saying, Matthew? Like
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
but like more substance, something that's less, and that's, yeah. I mean, I'm sure we've all had these corporate positions where admin puts on a very good facade of substance, but if you don't have to scratch the surface very deep to see that it's just about profits
I'm
and
fascinated
form.
by looking at Silicon Valley culture and what works and doesn't work over there, because there's plenty that looks like it should work but doesn't work at all. Like your wife might be able to like lend an ear in this one. Open plan offices, I hear, are terrible for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the layout of the open plan office. I mean, there's different ones, but it's the variety. I mean, and the good ones that want to foster like a collaborative, creative environment, you have to have variety in there. So you have to have the openness, but you also have to offer the privacy and basically be everything to all people. But absolutely, like nobody wants to work in a contemporary art museum, you know, walking into some wide open space with these Jackson Pollocks on the wall. Like that's great to walk through, but to sit there for 40 hours a week is just miserable. So yeah.
And John, would you be open to sharing this assessment that you're using? I'd be curious to see what it looks like.
Sure. In fact,
As would I.
yeah, if you would give me your contact information by some means, I'm sure David can figure all that out.
I'll send out an email with everybody included afterwards, and that way
Good.
is everybody okay with that? With sharing emails within this group?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'll
I
send
think it would be
you an email.
just nice to share resources and
Okay.
along with ideas, if
Absolutely.
that's something that people are comfortable with.
I will send you the link to it. You can take it online. Takes you about 20 minutes, half an hour. And then we can talk about what it says, what it means, and how I use it to help people make more informed choices about managing themselves, even in the most challenging circumstances. And so, yeah, we can have an experience. So you'll have an experience of it. So you'll see what I'm talking about.
Good. I would appreciate that. That would be wonderful.
And if we can get that done by the end of, by the next meeting, then we can talk about that at the part of our conversation about fit.
And I've taken John's assessment, and it really is it's impressive. Like it hits the mark. It's I don't know. It's good. And both my wife and I took it, which was interesting. And even though John doesn't do this, he would make a good couples therapist as well. Because it really is. I mean, it's like you know, a marriage is just a relationship, right? And it's all about communication
And expectation, yes.
and expectations, and the way that you approach your work each day can also kind of be it's very analogous to the way that you approach every relationship. I mean, anyway, so there's a lot of it's very applicable to all aspects of your life, I would say.
Well, I don't do couples therapy because I don't practicing without a license.
You wouldn't be the first one, John. Come on.
Well, we spend more time at work sometimes than we do at home, so.
That's right.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining this, and I'll.
Well, thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, and we'll try to make this a regular thing, and I'll send out a follow-up email afterwards. and I might even throw a couple ideas on what Matthew said and what Susan said, just as far as topics for the next one in the email. And y'all have a great rest of your week. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Nice meeting all of you. Appreciate
Happy
it.
August.
Yeah, happy August. Right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
I know.